Back when I was in high school and college, I was quite hefty, weighing around 250 pounds, earning the title of the biggest guy on the football team. Unfortunately, my junior year brought a career-ending knee injury that shattered my dreams of playing football. With that door closed, I shifted my focus to academics, pursued a degree in accounting, and never looked back. I go by the name James, and I'm an accountant. Life was pretty good overall. As you can imagine, I raked in a substantial income, owned a lovely home, and had a beautiful, loving wife named Sarah. So, what's the catch, you ask? Well, remember my weight from high school and college? At 35 years old, I found myself in the prime of life, but tipping the scales at nearly 430 pounds. It was a ticking time bomb, a heart attack waiting to happen. Lately, Sarah had been urging me to address my weight issue, applying pressure for a change. Mostly, I half-heartedly attempted the suggestions she offered. None of the fitness regimens or diets seemed to work, and I tried them all. I drastically cut my carb intake, only to replace those calories with more meat, but the pounds kept piling on. At one point, I was consuming the equivalent of a cow's worth of food in a day. It got so bad that I would have been better off sticking with carbs. On top of that, the excessive red meat consumption caused my blood pressure to skyrocket. Then, one night, everything took a turn. While Sarah and I were being intimate, I suddenly gave out and collapsed on top of her. It became nearly impossible for her to breathe with my weight pressing down, and things went downhill from there. Our argument about my weight, a recurring issue, escalated. Finally, Sarah made it clear that we wouldn't be having any intimacy until I shed at least 50 pounds. I left the room that night and spent it in the guest bedroom. The next morning I left for work early, hoping that things would blow over by the time I returned home. However, that was not the case. Sarah had gone online and found a weight loss boot camp for me. She believed it would be the best solution, tired of being married to the heaviest guy in the neighborhood, as it had become embarrassing for her. I examined the brochure she printed from the internet and decided to make the call. I immediately made the payment and arranged to leave for the camp as soon as possible. When Sarah asked if I was genuinely going through with it, I didn't respond. Instead, I headed to the bedroom to start packing my clothes and a few essentials. "Losing weight will be fantastic for you, James. You'll be healthier and feel so much better," she said. "The month will fly by in no time. I'll call you daily," she assured me. As I headed towards the guest room, she inquired, "We're not mad at each other. It's done. Why are you sleeping in there?" I responded, "But you mentioned we wouldn't sleep together again until I shed those 5 pounds. She clarified, "I said we wouldn't be intimate again until you lost it." She continued, "Anyway, I didn't really mean it. I was just upset." I believe she recognized how deeply she had hurt me and was attempting to make amends. Nevertheless, taking a break from home seemed like a good idea at the time. In the following days, I informed my workplace that I'd be traveling to focus on self-improvement while working remotely, assuring them that my performance would not be affected. On the scheduled day of departure, I hopped in my car and drove to the airport. I flew to Toussaint, embraced the arid desert heat, and began my stint at the camp. During the initial 3 weeks at the camp, I adhered to my usual fitness routine. Most of the first week was spent setting up my internet and computer systems for remote work. In the second week, I started observing camp activities, although I didn't actively participate. I merely watched and occasionally chuckled at some of their expectations. As for the meals, I treated the camp-provided food as an appetizer, ordering pizzas or burgers for delivery. The delivery personnel even learned that for a better tip, they should meet me on the access road used by the campers for jogging. I would then enjoy my meal at the picnic tables before returning to camp. So, after nearly 3 weeks at the camp, how much weight had I lost? I had actually gained 6 pounds, which meant I was 6 pounds heavier than when I had arrived. However, that all changed a few days later when I received a message from an old friend, Steve. Steve had recently navigated a messy divorce just over a year ago and was in the process of rebuilding his life. He wasn't actively seeking another wife at the moment. He simply wanted to have some fun and enjoy life for a while. He sent me a text, sharing that he had recently been on a date at a nightclub with a woman who was considerably younger and more adventurous than him. Moreover, he believed he had spotted Sarah at the same club, accompanied by another man. Intrigued, he approached them to confirm his suspicion, and indeed, it was her. She was out with an unfamiliar guy who was openly affectionate with her. In response, he discreetly took a few photos as evidence, knowing that I might find it hard to believe. When I saw the pictures, I had no doubt he was telling the truth. I could identify the unique necklace I had crafted for her during our trip to Mexico the previous year. That text message altered the purpose of my stay at the camp and reshaped my life. The following day, I took time to reflect on my life and contemplated the changes I needed to make. While I considered myself a genuinely good person with an excellent life, there were a couple of essential adjustments I needed to prioritize. Foremost was addressing my weight and self-image, while the other matter could wait until later. Therefore, the next morning, I visited the camp office and had a conversation with the director. I expressed my desire for a life transformation and enrolled in the 3-month intensive program designed for individuals who were approaching morbid obesity. I wasted no time and commenced the program that very morning. My first activity was a leisurely 2-mile walk in the desert with one of the training groups. It was a slow-paced walk intended to kickstart our metabolisms and burn calories before breakfast. I chuckled at the thought because during high school and college, I used to run around 4 miles daily at a much faster pace. However, this experience was a stark wake-up call. It reminded me of how far I had declined and that I was no longer the toned and athletic football player from my past. I struggled to complete the 2 miles, and towards the end, I couldn't maintain the pace. I received encouragement from a couple of 50-year-old women who passed me and praised my efforts. Upon my return to camp, I was drenched in sweat and had difficulty walking. My old football injury in my knee flared up. As I entered the cafeteria, some of the friends I had made at the camp called me over, surprised to see me in such a sweaty state. They were like me in a similar situation and had their own struggles. Despite their friendly gestures, I chose to sit alone at a small table in the back. If I was going to follow through with my newfound determination, I needed to distance myself from any negative influences. For breakfast, I had half a glass of orange juice, 1 slice of toast, half a cup of fresh fruit, and 2 pieces of low-fat turkey bacon. Even though I still felt hungry afterward, I had genuinely made up my mind to make a change. Following breakfast, we had an hour of free time before our first workshop. During that hour, I used the time to contact a private investigator who could provide me with the information I needed about Sarah. It wasn't a task I relished or eagerly anticipated, but it was a necessary step. I needed to determine the extent of her involvement with the other guy and whether there were any additional individuals involved. My feelings for Sarah remained strong, and upon reflection, I could somewhat comprehend the turmoil she might be experiencing. Depending on the extent of her involvement with this guy, there might be a chance for us to work through this. As I headed to the workshop, I decided to actively engage with the speakers they had lined up for us this time. I listened to the stories of former campers who had successfully shed a significant amount of weight and managed to keep it off. Many of them had made substantial life changes, and most attributed their transformations to a single event, person, or incident that had provided them with the motivation and focus to change. I realized that learning about Sarah's infidelity had been my motivating incident, but I understood that my transformation wasn't solely for her. It was for myself. Throughout high school, college, and my time with Sarah, I had never really needed to introspectively examine myself, as I had always been in relationships. However, the prospect of losing her made me acknowledge that there were aspects of myself that needed improvement. Soon after leaving the workshop, my phone rang, and it was Sarah, making her daily call. I hadn't spoken to her for the past 2 days since my conversation with Steve, as I was still too hurt to talk to her. She greeted me warmly, asking where I had been and why I hadn't answered her calls. She expressed how much she had missed me. I explained that I had been juggling work and weight loss efforts at the camp, which had been quite challenging. She assured me, "Don't worry, you'll be home in 2 days, and this will all be behind us." To which I responded firmly, "No, Sarah, I haven't lost the 50 pounds yet, so I won't be coming home." She replied, "James, that was just a random number I mentioned in frustration. I miss you, and I want you to come home. I don't care if you've only lost 2 pounds. I got what I wanted, and you're genuinely trying now. If you're truly committed to losing weight, you can do it just as effectively at home." I reiterated my stance, saying, "No, Sarah, a deal is a deal. I won't be returning until I've shed at least 50 pounds and perhaps more." I latched on to her choice of words, specifically when she mentioned she had gotten what she wanted. She probably should have specified who she wanted. Despite my determination, she continued, "Don't be so stubborn. You can continue your weight loss journey at home. Moreover, I've been reflecting on some things, and I genuinely want you to come back home." I firmly stated, "Sarah, my decision is final. Balancing work and my weight loss journey here is quite challenging, requiring complete immersion in this lifestyle. As a result, we may need to reduce our frequency of communication until I've completed this process. I'm doing this for both of us because I don't want you to feel embarrassed because of me any longer. I now understand how difficult it must have been for you, having an overweight admirer following you around all this time just because he loves you." In response, she said, "I shouldn't have said that, I was just angry." I ended the phone call, changed into sweatpants and a sweatshirt, preparing for our morning exercise class. Upon arriving at the gym, I decided to take a different approach. Instead of hiding in the back, I positioned myself in the front row. The trainer for that day was Debbie, known for her no-nonsense approach. We had never exchanged a single word since my arrival, and I had caught her giving me disapproving looks a few times. Even as I stood in the front row, her gaze seemed to convey a desire to push me to the back with just the force of her stare. We began with stretching and reaching exercises. I struggled not only to touch my toes but even my knees, despite my sincere efforts. Surprisingly, I was already sweating profusely before we had even begun the actual exercises during the warm-up session. The humiliation commenced. We began with light leg lifts, aiming to lift our knees to waist height. By the time we finished, I was drenched in sweat, and Debbie had a mischievous glint in her eyes and a wicked smirk on her face. We proceeded to arm lifts, and she pushed us to the point where I couldn't raise my arms any higher, although I persevered. More embarrassment awaited us as we got down on the mat. In my prime, I could bench press over 200 pounds, but that day I couldn't manage a single push-up. I barely completed one while standing, only to collapse immediately afterward. Debbie's satisfied expression followed me as I left the gym. Afterward, I took a shower before lunch. During the break, I visited the clinic to have my knee examined. It turned out to be a minor strain, and they wrapped it up for me. The morning's exertion had pushed the muscles around the joint further than they had been in a while. The doctor advised icing it for a couple of days, assuring me it would be fine. I could still walk on it the next day, but he cautioned against overdoing it. This routine continued for the next week. I stuck to the provided meals, avoiding desserts, and only indulging in snacks when absolutely necessary. The initial 5 days were incredibly challenging. I knew I had become the subject of jokes and laughter, but after spending 3 weeks at the camp, I felt it was well-deserved. At the end of my first week of dedicated effort, I had shed 8 pounds. Additionally, I received my first report from the private investigator during that same week. He provided me with photographs. Some were taken at a restaurant where Sarah had dined with the guy, and he even had a recorded conversation featuring her. Naturally, there were also pictures of her entering a motel room with him, along with details about how long they stayed there. Their intentions were glaringly obvious. Interestingly, the act of her being intimate with him didn't wound me as deeply as overhearing some of the disparaging remarks she made about me behind my back. The guy had inquired about what finally led her to give him a chance after his persistent pursuit for months. Surprisingly, I hadn't heard anything about this from her, indicating she had been keeping secrets for an extended period. Apparently, she had known this guy since her college days, but their involvement had only recently begun. She confided in him that she was weary and embarrassed by me, claiming I was too out of shape to satisfy her anymore. Consequently, she had sent me off to camp in order to explore a relationship with a more suitable partner. She also asked him how he managed to conceal their affair from his wife. He revealed that, like her, he held the dominant role in his marriage, and his wife obediently followed his lead without questioning him. This revelation hurt me deeply, leading me to conclude that there was nothing left to salvage in our marriage. My decision was made. In the second week of my intensive training, I stepped up the pace during morning walks. In the afternoons, I began swimming laps or walking in the pool. I also engaged in skill-building activities such as archery and fencing. I needed to acquire some hobbies to occupy my time once I left the camp. Additionally, I retained the services of a skilled divorce attorney, explaining the situation and how I had uncovered it. I arranged for him to receive reports from the private investigator to stay informed of any developments. I instructed him to prepare the necessary documents for the divorce proceedings, even though I had yet to determine the exact end date. At the conclusion of my initial month of intensive training, I felt like a different person, or at least closer to the man I used to be. I had shed nearly 40 pounds, and my overall well-being had improved significantly. My daily routine had undergone a transformation. I began rising earlier and replaced the morning walk with a 3-mile jog. While I continued attending Debbie's exercise class, her attitude toward me seemed to have changed. She no longer looked down on me and had even started to greet me with a smile each morning. The most surprising moment came when, during a set of 15 push-ups, I encountered an unexpected weight on my back after completing the 10th push-up. Despite the added resistance from Debbie pushing down on my back, I managed to squeeze out another push-up. I also managed to handle most of my work responsibilities from the camp. During my daily meditation sessions, I shifted my focus from motivating myself to lose weight to evaluating my relationships with friends and associates. It dawned on me that many of them had not been laughing with me about my weight for quite some time. They had actually been laughing at me. By the 6th week, my weight had hit a plateau. Although the pounds were still coming off, the rate had slowed considerably. I had lost just over 60 pounds, but I was no longer able to maintain the rapid 1 to 1.5 pounds per day I had initially achieved. Recalling my coach's strategy from school, increasing the intensity when out of shape, I incorporated a second, more demanding run into my daily schedule. Despite my knee issues and advancing age preventing me from running as I did in college, I found enjoyment in it and gradually extended my distance each day. Sometimes, if I still had the energy, I would head to the gym after my run to lift weights. Even then, I exercised caution and relied on my memory of my past athletic accomplishments to guide me. Initially, it was quite embarrassing. After boasting about bench pressing over 200 pounds for years, I found myself struggling to lift even 100 pounds. Another surprising aspect was the inconsistency of my progress. I managed to push my bench press to 100 pounds, only to struggle and be unable to lift it again for over a week. My leg strength was notably weak due to my knee injury, preventing me from doing squats and several other demanding leg exercises. The same limitation applied to exercises targeting my back, especially those requiring a standing position, hindered by my weakened knee joint. However, I gradually improved, although the emotional pain in my heart persisted. One evening, while attempting to lift 170 pounds, the first repetition went relatively smoothly. The second repetition proved challenging, and despite common sense advising against a third attempt, my emotional state clouded my judgment. During the ascent, the bar suddenly felt significantly heavier, and I couldn't manage to push it up any further. Desperately exerting all my strength, I contemplated escaping from beneath the bar when someone grabbed it and helped lift it back onto its supports. James, who had come to my aid, remarked, "Well, that was quite a brilliant move, Debbie. You struggled with the second rep, so what made you think you could handle another? Were you aware that being alone in the weight room violates camp policy? Do you grasp the reason now?" I replied, "I apologize, Debbie. It won't occur again, and thank you for rescuing me. I understand it's just another opportunity for you to poke fun, so enjoy regaling everyone with how you had to assist the out-of-shape guy again." After that, I left the weight room. If Debbie had any further admonishments or grievances, she kept them to herself and let me depart without further comment. The following day, after breakfast, I started exploring alternative exercise options, looking for a different workout group aside from Kajoy's. I noticed a yoga class, a Pilates group, and a step aerobics class, which appeared enjoyable and had more women than men. As I was about to join the step aerobics class, I heard a voice behind me. "I'd be genuinely disappointed if you entered there, James." Turning around, I saw Debbie standing there. She was dressed in her usual class attire, and her gaze was fixed on me. "Why don't you attend my class today like you usually do?" she suggested. "Afterward, I'd like to have a conversation with you. You can do as you please tomorrow." "Okay," I agreed. She extended her petite hand and I nodded before taking it. We returned to her workout room and participated in her class. "Please take a shower and meet me back here," she instructed. Half an hour later, I stood in front of the workout room, waiting for Debbie to return. I wasn't sure what her intentions were. Perhaps she wanted to reprimand me once more about the risks of exercising alone, emphasizing how it violated the camp's safety regulations and could result in expulsion. She might even mention her obligation to report me to the camp director. Regardless, nothing could make me feel worse than the news I had received earlier that morning. My private investigator had informed me that Sarah had brought her new partner to our home the previous night, and he had spent the night. As I contemplated how to deal with Sarah's actions, Debbie's arrival completely erased her from my thoughts. Despite her drill sergeant demeanor, Debbie had a certain allure. Standing at around 5'2" with jet black hair and gray eyes, she possessed a unique charm. My favorite sight is when she turns and glances over one shoulder, her hair falling to frame one side of her face, leaving just one eye to lock onto you. It feels as though that eye is delving into your soul, determining if you can push through one more repetition than you thought possible. While her chest isn't exceptionally large, it's substantial and dictates the type of attire she can wear. It's the primary reason why so many guys enroll in her exercise classes. Her classes are demanding, yet most men prefer them over the easier ones just to sneak a peek at her. Now her rear end is a different story. It's not oversized, but it's toned and firm to the point where I'm certain you could bounce a quarter off it. Rumor has it around the camp that she might be a lesbian, but her classes remain packed. When she arrived in a loose-fitting sweatshirt and jeans one day, it caught me off guard. I had never seen her in such attire before. She had her hair pinned up on top of her head and wore oversized sunglasses. On an average woman, that outfit would be suitable for a trip to the mall, running errands, or doing yard work on a leisurely Saturday afternoon. However, on Debbie, it ignited a whole new realm of fantasies. It made her seem more human, perhaps even vulnerable. She flashed a smile at me and gestured towards the exit. This puzzled me because I had thought we were going to have a conversation. She assured me, "Relax, James, you're not in trouble, and there won't be any repercussions. I just wanted us to talk, and when I need to think, I typically hop in my Jeep and drive out into the desert. It clears my mind and makes everything seem better. By the time I return, either I've resolved my issue or it doesn't appear as daunting as before I left. Perhaps it's merely a means of stress relief, a way to put things in their proper perspective, but it somehow works. James, whether you realize it or not, you've become a concern for me." Those words hit me hard. Great, now I'm a problem for her. Damn, I had enough problems of my own without having to worry about another woman disliking me. She led me to the rear of the facility, where she had a black Jeep Wrangler parked. I climbed in and had to grab onto something as she sped away as soon as the door closed. We traveled down the highway for a brief moment before she abruptly turned onto an unmarked, unpaved road that I would have missed. We zipped through some sparse vegetation as we continued on, and suddenly there was nothing but arid, sandy terrain stretching out before us, all the way to the distant mountains. She shifted the Jeep into four-wheel drive and slowed down as the road became uneven and remained unpaved. She appeared to know where she was headed, so I held on. Eventually, we reached the edge of a medium-sized canyon. She engaged the parking brake, got out, and walked to the edge. She gazed out, seemingly gathering herself, and then turned to me, her expression intense. "James, what's happening with you?" she continued. "When you first arrived here, you were just another overweight, privileged young man who didn't take this place seriously, so I didn't take you seriously either. You had your conference calls, late-night pizza runs, and you hung out with the class clowns. We see about 100 guys like that every year. They come in overweight and out of shape, maybe lose 4 or 5 pounds if they're lucky, then head back home and brag about how tough it was. Some make it a yearly ritual. But then something changed, and so did you. I don't know why or what triggered it, but you became different. The first day you showed up for my class and stood right up front, I was certain you wouldn't last 10 minutes. In fact, I tried to discourage you, but you gave it everything you had. You left there drenched in sweat, and I thought it was a one-time thing, but I was intrigued. Over the past few weeks, I've witnessed an astonishing transformation. Not only have you shed an incredible amount of weight, but you've also gotten yourself in remarkable shape. You're now at a point where you're hardly overweight at all. You don't even resemble the man who arrived here. This is something I never anticipated. It's almost like a backhanded compliment, especially coming from someone like me, James. She went on, "You might not be aware of this, but as the changes in you began, I underwent some changes myself. I shifted from being convinced you wouldn't last to becoming your biggest supporter. I observed your nighttime desert runs and your weightlifting sessions at night. That's why I was there the other night when you pushed yourself too hard." Typically, people who've lost as much weight as you have, even when they haven't achieved the level of fitness you have now, tend to feel fulfilled and happy. They become more self-confident, proud of their accomplishments. In the upcoming ceremony we're holding next month before the camp season ends, you'll be receiving several awards, but please don't share that I told you. But you seem far from happy. It's almost the opposite with you. Most people come here feeling sad and downcast because of their weight issues, and they leave happier, more self-assured individuals. When you arrived, you were already content, maybe a bit angry, but you exuded confidence and security. You've worked tirelessly and made incredible progress, looking fantastic. However, you appear sadder and more withdrawn now, and it saddens me as well. Initially, you used to sit in the back and enjoy laughter with those jokers, and you were content. Now, you've inspired numerous campers and staff members, but you retreat to work out even more intensely alone. James, I'm aware of the opinions people hold about me around here. I've heard all the nicknames, and honestly, I couldn't care less. For me, this is just a job to help people discover the motivation to make changes in their weight and health. Nothing more, nothing less. I encourage them to change, set an example, and assist them in their workouts. Some grasp it, others don't, but it's never personal. It's merely a job. However, over the past couple of months, you've become more than just a job to me. You've become deeply personal. That's why I snapped at you the other night. When I saw that bar descending toward you, it terrified me. I thought you might have been seriously injured or worse, and somewhere deep down, I even wondered if you wanted that. I was taken aback and hugged her in response. She seemed to need to talk, so I simply listened. She shared her life story, which was nothing like what I had expected. She began her athletic journey in gymnastics, but faced frequent injuries as she didn't possess the typical short, muscular body of competitive gymnasts. Some of the girls in the sport also took pills to delay breast development and hip widening, but she chose not to. Soon, she couldn't compete with those who were using pills, and her injuries continued. She eventually transitioned to fitness competitions. While not quite bodybuilding, it was similar, emphasizing femininity, grace, and less extreme muscularity. She excelled, but once again the issue of pills surfaced, and the pressure was even more intense. In many cases, women who won competitions and secured endorsements were involved in less than savory dealings with sponsors and judges. Men had always paid attention to her, even during her gymnastics days, but in this new arena, it was almost expected. After a near-assault incident, from which she was saved only by her loud screams and the security team's intervention, she decided to quit fitness competitions as well. She returned to school, pursued degrees in exercise physiology and kinesiology, and embarked on a career as a personal trainer. Her tenure at the camp spanned 6 years. Hearing all this made me feel closer to her than I had felt to anyone in a long time. Thus, I confided in her about the reason for my presence at the camp, opening up about my wife, Sarah, and how she had become ashamed of me, desiring to send me away so she could secretly be with someone in better physical shape. "Well, she won't feel embarrassed by you anymore," she assured me. "The next time she sees you, she'll be all over you." I responded, "Nope, the next time she sees me will probably be in a divorce court." I made an effort to understand things from her perspective. I acknowledged that I had allowed myself to deteriorate physically, and she was right to expect me to take better care of myself. However, the way she handled it and the hurtful things she said about me had deeply wounded me, leading me to question whether she truly cared for me. Yet her infidelity was the last straw and a deal-breaker. While I might have eventually forgiven the other issues, I would never be able to trust her again. That night marked a turning point, and thereafter I continued attending Debbie's class every day, but she pushed me even harder. Many of the guys were envious as I did push-ups with Debbie on my back. Occasionally, she joined me for nighttime runs. Our relationship never ventured beyond the bounds of friendship, but at times, her gaze sent tingles down my spine. Back at home, the situation was deteriorating. According to the private investigator's report, Sarah had terminated her affair with her college friend, who seemed solely interested in a physical relationship. He had practically been living in my house, spending several days a week there, causing even his own wife to voice her discontent. The breaking point had come when he and Sarah started quarreling. She was attempting to end their involvement because the initial excitement had faded, but he was reluctant to let her go. Sarah began calling me more frequently to inquire about my return home. Her messages were filled with expressions of longing and love. Since the camp would be closing for about a month at the end of the season, I knew I would have to return home soon. Debbie and I went shopping because I needed a new wardrobe. Having shed nearly 140 pounds, none of my old clothes fit me anymore. While I was shopping, I came across something I had always dreamed of, but thought I could never have. A vibrant red 2009 Mustang GT displayed at a car lot across from the mall. Intrigued, I ventured onto the lot and inspected the car closely. The door was open, so I sat down inside. I was taken aback by the contrast from over 100 pounds ago when I struggled to fit into my old car. Now, I could easily slide in and out of this car that I had grown to love. I sought out a salesman and initiated the paperwork. Once he checked my credit and I arranged a transfer from my account, I drove away from the lot in my new acquisition, while Debbie trailed behind me in her Jeep. Upon securing my new car, I made a few calls to my private investigator and lawyer. I informed them about the upcoming ceremony and requested that they ensure the divorce papers were prepared and delivered to me at the camp by a messenger. Following this, I contacted Sarah and shared the news that the camp would conclude over the weekend, culminating in a ceremony for families and friends of the campers. She expressed her enthusiasm about seeing me again, but I cautioned her not to get overly excited, as this might not be a joyous occasion for her. She replied, "James, in the past few months, I've come to realize that appearance isn't everything. It's more important to be with someone who loves and supports you, regardless of their weight or physical appearance. So, even if you've only lost a single pound, it's time for you to return home so we can move forward with our lives. I love you, and I miss you. I've had ample time to reflect on what I truly want and need in my life. I've missed my big, strong husband." With that, we concluded our conversation. She remained oblivious to my awareness of her infidelity, continuing to act as if everything were normal between us, and I chose to keep my knowledge to myself. Over the next few days, I took several significant steps to reshape my life and career. Some of these actions I kept hidden, even from Debbie. Speaking of Debbie, she underwent a noticeable transformation as the ceremony drew nearer. The night before the event, we had dinner together so that I could express my gratitude for her unwavering support and inspiration. To my surprise, she held my hand for a while as we conversed. She began, "I suppose your time here is coming to an end? Soon your wife will be at the ceremony and you can return to Ohio, either to assert yourself or proceed with a divorce." All I could manage to say was, "Yes, I suppose." I missed the sorrow in her voice because my thoughts were elsewhere. We returned to the camp in silence, carrying many unspoken thoughts between us. After a brief interlude, she broke the quietness. "I understand you've always been an honorable man, hesitant to entertain any relationship while still married. But have you made a decision about reconciling with her? I'm wondering if perhaps a plane ticket to Ohio might be in my future." I replied, "Debbie, we've maintained honesty throughout, and whether you realize it or not, I have deep feelings for you, so I won't start lying now. I can't confirm the arrival of any plane to Ohio or elsewhere, but it's not a bad thought." She nodded, and I didn't see her again until the ceremony. The following day felt unusual for me. I rose early and embarked on my solitary morning run. While most campers were likely celebrating the culmination of weeks or months of workouts and dieting, running had become an integral part of who I was. Just because I no longer had to do it didn't mean I'd skip it. Following my run, I searched for Debbie but couldn't locate her anywhere. A couple of staff members informed me that she was in her living quarters feeling unwell. I also heard that Sarah was diligently searching the complex for me. As a jest, I ventured to the auditorium to see if I could spot Sarah. I did indeed see her and casually passed by her, yet she failed to recognize me. I then ensured the messenger was nearby, and satisfied that he was, I arranged to signal him when the time was right, which he agreed to. Once the ceremony commenced, everyone gathered in the auditorium. I had the opportunity to witness something remarkable. I spotted Debbie not far from Sarah, allowing me to compare them side by side. It felt like comparing apples to oranges. Sarah sported short blonde hair and a tall, slender physique. While not as fit as Debbie, she possessed a slender and attractive appearance. Debbie, on the other hand, radiated breathtaking beauty but was shorter in stature. Debbie engaged in conversation with someone, seemingly discussing me, and Sarah overheard. Her reaction was intense as she stormed away from the table and took a seat. When she noticed me looking at her and offered a smile, she turned her head away, and I chuckled. Clearly, she believed I was merely an unknown individual attempting to flirt with her. Over the past months, she had been dating her old college buddy Thomas while trying to keep it a secret. She had even taken him to my house and spent time with him in my bed. But now, she acted as if she was too virtuous to receive a stranger's attention. Life is unpredictable. As the ceremony unfolded, Sarah perked up every time she heard my name mentioned, attempting to catch a glimpse of me. Finally, I was called to ascend the stage to receive my awards. I received recognition for the most significant weight loss in a 1-month period, the largest overall weight loss, and another for being the most inspirational camper. I had started in terrible shape, but had made significant progress in both my weight loss and overall fitness, serving as an inspiring example for those around me. During my speech, as I gazed out at the audience, I noticed Sarah sitting on the edge of her seat, completely astonished by my transformation. She could hardly believe her eyes as she saw her once overweight husband on stage. When I invited Debbie onto the stage to express my gratitude officially, the audience erupted in cheers and applause. Sarah's icy glare towards Debbie could have been deadly if looks could destroy. Debbie and I exchanged a handshake, and we posed for several pictures as I thanked her. After the director's closing remarks, everyone adjourned for the dinner that followed the ceremony. Minutes after most of the guests had left the room, Sarah approached Debbie and me in a furious manner. She began by saying, "No wonder you wanted to stay up there for so long. You just wanted to parade this woman around, rubbing it in my face." I replied calmly, "Sarah, Debbie and I are only friends at this point. There's nothing romantic going on, so before you make a scene, you might want to reconsider." Sarah quickly changed her tone, apologizing. "I'm sorry, honey. It's just that you look amazing. You're so slim and different. I felt jealous. I've been so lonely waiting for you at home all this time." I questioned, "Lonely, you say?" She nodded vigorously. I then displayed a photo of her in a restaurant with Thomas on my phone, asking, "So who is this guy you've been going out with?" She replied, "Oh, he's just an old college friend I bumped into. He means nothing." I retorted, "He means something, Sarah, and he's the reason we're headed for divorce. I know everything about him. I know you started with him even before I left. I know you wanted me to come to the camp because you were embarrassed to be seen with a husband who was overweight. You sought someone with a better physique to satisfy you. I have recordings of you saying it, so there's no point in trying to deny it. Moreover, I have pictures of you taking him into our house, our home, Sarah, and being intimate with him in our bed. There's really nothing left to discuss here." As I prepared to depart, I motioned to my lawyer's messenger, who promptly approached and handed her the divorce papers. She began to plead, saying, "James, we can discuss this. It was just a fling, a mistake. I ended it because I genuinely missed you. I came to my senses, realized I love you, and we share more than anyone else. The only thing I disliked was your weight. But that's gone now." I replied, "Well, Sarah, it seems we both came to our senses. Once I learned about your affair, I realized I didn't want to be married to someone ashamed of me. The allure of our marriage vanished when I heard what you said about me. We do have common ground, though. You were ashamed of a heavyset guy, and I can't stand to be with a cheater, so it's time to move on." She insisted, "We can work through this. Come home, we'll talk, seek counseling. We have too much history to throw away." I explained, "It's settled. We live in a no-fault state, so assets are split evenly. Since we have no children, there's no dispute. Our home accounts for 70% of our net worth, and I'm leaving it to you. You're getting a better deal than the courts would grant. Just walk away and we'll both be better off. As for my living situation, I'll start fresh with someone who won't be ashamed of me." Tears welled in her eyes and she asked, "Where will you live? Please stay with me. Let me make it right." I responded, "You haven't cared about me since the affair began, so I don't understand your concern now. I won't set foot in that house again. That's why I gave it to you. I'm beginning anew with someone who won't hide me behind closed doors. I shed over 140 pounds here, but you lost a husband who would have loved you forever, a wonderful home, and the family we could have had, all for a fling. My weight was just an excuse. If you ask me, you're the real victor." With those words, I walked away, leaving her behind. Our only contact after that was through our lawyers until the divorce was finalized. I did receive a call from her father, who inquired about visiting to reconcile. I shared the details of our breakup and her actions, offering to provide proof through pictures, audio, or video. Upon hearing this, he simply wished me a good life, and I graciously accepted his advice. The divorce proceeded smoothly without any trouble from Sarah. We occasionally kept in touch, but nothing significant. Eventually, Debbie and I acted on our feelings and became a couple. We now lead a happy life, with family, friends, and colleagues astonished by my transformation in both body and life. They adore Debbie and often tell me I made the right choice. I'm grateful we found each other. Sarah sold our house and moved in with her parents, eventually finding a new partner and gaining weight. I sent her a brochure for the fitness boot camp I attended, not to gloat, but genuinely trying to help, as it had worked for me. I even offered to cover the cost. After all, if she hadn't been embarrassed by me, I would never have met Debbie. Regrettably, she declined. In the end, it appears everyone found their own happiness. Thanks for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Take care.